Do you ever feel invisible, like no matter what you do, people take you for granted? Chances are, it's not what you're doing. It's what you're silently allowing. Today, I'll reveal the quiet behavior that's costing you respect and how to stop it. Most people believe respect is something you ask for, explain, or earn by doing more. So when they feel themselves being overlooked, ignored, or taken lightly, their instinct is to increase effort. They talk more. They clarify intentions. They justify decisions. They stay reachable at all hours. They respond faster. They give more chances. On the surface, it looks mature, patient, and emotionally intelligent. Underneath, it sends a very different message. Over-explaining is rarely about clarity. It's about discomfort with being misunderstood. It's the urge to make sure everyone is okay with you, agrees with you, or at least doesn't think badly of you. So instead of stating a boundary, you attach a paragraph to it. Instead of making a decision, you provide a backstory. Instead of allowing silence, you rush to fill it. Each explanation is an attempt to manage how others perceive you, and perception management slowly erodes authority. When you explain too much, you teach people that your position is negotiable. You unintentionally invite debate where none was required. A simple "I can't do that" becomes "I can't do that because I've been busy lately and I didn't want to disappoint you. And maybe next time, if things slow down." The listener doesn't hear kindness. They hear uncertainty, and uncertainty signals that with enough pressure, guilt, or persistence, you might bend. Over-availability works the same way. Being constantly accessible feels generous, but it removes urgency. When people know you'll always reply, always show up, always accommodate, they stop adjusting their behavior around you. They don't value what doesn't require effort to obtain. Availability without boundaries feels like reliability at first, but over time it turns into entitlement. People begin to assume your time is flexible, your energy is unlimited, and your needs are secondary, not because they are cruel, but because you train them to believe that you will make room no matter what. The more consistently you override yourself for others, the more invisible your limits become. This is how being taken for granted usually starts, not with disrespect, but with comfort. Comfort grows when there is no consequence for overstepping. When you answer every call immediately, people stop asking if it's a good time. When you always say yes, people stop appreciating the sacrifice behind it. When you explain every decision, people stop trusting your judgment and start expecting access to your reasoning. There is a quiet confidence in brevity. People who are respected don't rush to be understood. They allow their words to land and sit. They don't chase agreement. They don't rush to soften every edge. They state, pause, and let others adjust. That pause is not passive. It's powerful. Silence after a statement creates gravity. It signals that what was said stands on its own. Over-explaining removes that gravity. It makes your words lighter, easier to dismiss, easier to step over. The more you talk, the less weight each word carries. Many people confuse kindness with self-erasure. They believe that being considerate means being endlessly accommodating. But consideration without self-respect teaches others to treat you casually. Respect is not built through endurance, it's built through consistency and how you honor yourself. When someone watches you constantly make yourself available, constantly justify your choices, constantly smooth over discomfort, they subconsciously rank you as someone who will adjust before they do. Not because you're less valuable, but because you present yourself as less bound. Boundaries don't require speeches. They require calm repetition and restraint. When you stop explaining, people feel the absence immediately. They may push back. They may question. They may feel unsettled. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign the dynamic is changing. At first, people may accuse you of being distant or different. What they're really reacting to is the loss of easy access, the loss of unlimited availability, the loss of emotional labor they were receiving for free. When you no longer overfunction, others are forced to meet you where you stand instead of where you bend. The shift doesn't require confrontation, it requires restraint. Answering when you have the capacity instead of immediately. Saying less and meaning more. Letting others sit with unanswered questions instead of rushing to resolve their discomfort. Allowing misunderstandings to exist long enough for people to seek clarity respectfully. instead of you delivering it preemptively. People respect what they have to approach with care. They value what has edges. When everything about you is soft, open, and endlessly accessible, there is nothing to navigate. And when there is nothing to navigate, there is nothing to value. Over-explain and over-availability are habits rooted in fear of disapproval. The moment you stop feeding that fear, your presence changes. Your words become deliberate. Your time becomes specific. Your energy becomes selective. Others feel it before they understand it. You don't need to announce this change. You don't need to justify it. You don't need permission. The less you say, the more people listen. The less you rush, the more your presence is felt. The less available you are without intention, the more respect naturally recalibrates around you. This is not about withdrawing love or becoming cold. It's about allowing your yes to mean something because no exists. It's about letting silence do the work explanations used to do. It's about trusting that the right people won't require access to every thought in your head to respect you. When you stop making yourself endlessly understandable and endlessly available, people stop treating you as endlessly optional. Most people don't realize how much power exists in holding your ground quietly. They think influence comes from persuasion, from explanation, from constant reassurance. They believe if they just talk longer, justify more, or respond faster, people will understand, appreciate, and respect them. But the truth is almost the opposite. When you fill every silence, when you constantly respond to every prompt or question, when you yield to every expectation, you teach people that they don't need to meet you halfway. They don't need to adjust their behavior. They don't need to honor your time or your presence. You have made it clear that your ground is endlessly malleable, that your space can always be compressed to fit someone else's convenience. And that is why people take you for granted. Holding your ground doesn't mean confrontation or aggression. It doesn't mean coldness or withdrawal. It's not about creating tension or forcing others into submission. It's about establishing a baseline of self-respect that others cannot ignore. It's about letting people understand that your attention, your time, your energy, and your boundaries are finite, and that these limits are non-negotiable. When you begin to hold your ground, you stop sending invisible signals that encourage overreach. You stop over-explaining, over-justifying, or overextending. You create a space where others have to be conscious of their actions if they want to remain within your orbit. One of the most subtle ways people lose respect is by permitting themselves to be stretched too thin for the sake of others. When you are always available, when you always accommodate, you train people to assume that your presence is permanent, that your patience is unlimited, that your attention is automatic. You teach them that there are no consequences for their disregard, but respect is never cultivated in the absence of consequence. It requires a boundary that others recognize and must navigate. Holding your ground provides that boundary, silently but undeniably, and it changes the way people interact with you almost immediately. The act of holding your ground also shifts the psychological dynamic of relationships. When you respond selectively, when you allow silence to exist, when you refrain from immediately clarifying or justifying, you force others into awareness. They become more attentive. They become more thoughtful. They begin to understand that your time, your energy, and your presence are valuable. You are no longer a resource that is automatically accessible at their convenience. You are someone who commands consideration simply by maintaining your stance. This is subtle authority, silent, unwavering, and far more powerful than words could ever achieve. Holding your ground also teaches emotional discipline. It requires resisting the urge to placate, to explain, to rush in and fill gaps created by discomfort or misunderstanding. Many people operate out of fear of conflict or fear of being disliked. They fill silences, over-clarify intentions, and bend too easily to maintain harmony. But this constant yielding undermines respect. When you hold your ground, you demonstrate that respect for yourself is non-negotiable, and by extension, that others must rise to meet that standard if they want to maintain a connection with you. It establishes a clear hierarchy, not of superiority or control, but of self-respect and intentional presence. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools in holding your ground. Most people are terrified of pauses. They rush to fill them with explanations, stories, or justifications. But silence carries weight. It communicates confidence, authority, and composure. It signals that you do not need to justify your existence, your choices, or your decisions. When someone speaks and you pause, you create space for reflection. When you pause before responding, you allow others to consider their words and actions carefully. When you maintain silence instead of rushing to accommodate, you subtly command attention and recalibrate the respect dynamic. Another aspect of holding your ground is learning to say no without apology. Many people confuse politeness with total compliance. They believe that saying yes, no matter the cost, is kindness. But unconditional yes creates entitlement. When you say no, firmly and without over-explaining, you signal that your priorities, your energy, and your boundaries matter. Others may feel discomfort initially, but this discomfort is the recalibration they need. It forces them to see you as a person with limits and expectations rather than a perpetual convenience. Respect grows in this recalibration. People respond to firmness with acknowledgement, and acknowledgement leads to consideration and value. Holding your ground also builds consistency. Consistency is critical because it communicates predictability in behavior, not in availability, but in principle. People respect what they can understand and rely on, but only if it is grounded in standards rather than submission. When you maintain your boundaries consistently, others learn what is acceptable and what is not. They no longer take liberties with your time, your energy, or your emotions. You do not need to remind them constantly or enforce rules repeatedly. Your quiet consistency establishes a structure in which respect becomes the default, not the exception. A significant part of holding your ground involves detachment from the need for immediate approval. Many people operate on the invisible expectation that they must be liked, understood, or approved of at every moment. This craving leads to over-explaining and over-availability, which diminishes respect. By holding your ground, you detach from the compulsion to be immediately understood. You do not chase validation. You do not apologize for asserting your limits. Instead, you act intentionally according to your values and priorities. Others respond to this level of integrity with recognition and respect, often without you needing to say a word. Holding your ground is not a one-time act. It is a daily practice. It requires awareness, self-control, and courage. It requires paying attention to the moments when you feel compelled to over-explain, over-justify, or overextend. It requires noticing when you are being pulled off your center by fear of discomfort or rejection. In those moments, choosing restraint, choosing to maintain your position, and choosing to respect your own limits is the act that slowly transforms how others perceive and treat you. Ultimately, holding your ground is about reclaiming your own power. It is about understanding that your value is inherent, not contingent on constant affirmation, explanation, or accommodation. It is about recognizing that when you stop filling every silence, when you stop immediately smoothing over discomfort, when you start standing firm in your presence and principles, people naturally begin to recalibrate their behavior. They begin to treat you with consideration. They begin to recognize the worth of your time, your energy, and your attention. They begin to understand, silently, that you are not endlessly available, endlessly flexible, or endlessly justifiable. Holding your ground creates a ripple effect in every interaction. Conversations become more intentional. Commitments are taken seriously. Words are weighed. Effort is matched. Energy is respected. Over time, this quiet, consistent practice builds a reputation that commands respect effortlessly. It shifts relationships from automatic entitlement to conscious engagement. It changes the way people value your presence without a single argument, demand, or confrontation. And it demonstrates the ultimate truth. Respect is never demanded through explanation or availability. It is earned through intentionality, boundaries, and the unwavering choice to hold your ground.